guys? Eric here, back San Diego Comic-Con. I'm here with Bryan Fuller, executive producer of one of my favorite new shows this year, Hannibal. And Bryan, what's it like? You had your big panel a couple nights ago. How did that go?
We did. We had a really great turnout and a very enthusiastic crowd. One of the coolest things about the experience was seeing all of the cosplay. With there were many Hannibals, and there were many Will Grahams, and there were many Stags, which is the Wendigo from the show. So it was really neat to see how inspired and inspirational the audience was. It was great.
I did not get into that panel. It was so packed. Like 2.5 hours before, they shut down the line. So there was plenty of fans there for you. Is that really gratifying when you have a show that people are like, oh, this? People were like, are they going to renew this show? It's on the bubble, but then you come here and you see people love this show, and you see it resonating like that.
Oh yeah, it was interesting I walked the floor after the panel yesterday, which was a music panel with our composer Bryan Reitzel, who's amazing. But I walked the floor with Hugh Dancy, and it was amazing how many people stopped him and wanted pictures because they were big fans of Hannibal and his work in Hannibal. It was wonderful to see.
Well, okay, so let's talk about Season 2. And if you haven't seen Season 1, we're about to spoil the hell out of it, and you really should because it's amazing. We left on a hell of a cliffhanger.
Yes.
You really completely subverted everything there. Where do we go from here with it looks like, I don't want to say Hannibal won because he has sort of a greater goal in mind, right?
He won this round.
Right. And what does Will do now at this point, Kat? What is Will's next step?
Well, one of the great things about hitting rock bottom is that you have nothing left to lose. So for Will Graham, he's going to be coming out swinging, and he's going to be a scrappier, feistier Will Graham in Season 2. So I'm very excited to see what Hugh does with that.
It was obviously so cool just to get that visual, the famous Hannibal Lecter visual of talking through the cell to someone and have it completely subverted like that. What was your eureka moment when you came upon that?
I pitched that moment when I pitched the series, and I said the very last image of the first season will be that iconic shot coming down the corridor to the last cell on the left, and instead of Hannibal Lecter being in there, it's going to be Will Graham. So I knew that's exactly where we were going, because in the books, we know that Will Graham has a psychological break as a result of investigating the Minnesota Shrike.
Right.
So we kind of told that story, but we put in a lot of colors and details that may not have been on the page.
Has that been, it's a really fun aspect of the show, and for you as a fan of the books it's based on, really interesting for you to do and take the books, take that template, and veer off on it, but then you keep kind of going back into it, like sort of weaving off, but then always making sure to touch upon those key moments.
Yes, I am a big fan of Thomas Harris. I've read those books, and as a fan of the books, I wanted to make sure that we had that DNA woven into the series. So I keep on going back to some of the more iconic things and trying to sew those into our series, because we can't ignore that there have been a few versions of Hannibal Lecter, and we want to honor all of them because it's a great family to be a part of.
Now, what is Jack Crawford's sort of role in all this going to be going forward? Because Will, someone that he invested a lot in and kind of brought back in, and in the finale they even sort of discussed about, was he pushing him too much? Does he feel guilty? Does he think he did it and think, am I responsible, or does he still have skepticism that Will did it?
I think the journey for Jack Crawford in Season 2 is going to be one of clarity. So he needs to find out those things, not in any kind of suspicion, but something that provides cold, hard evidence. So he's going to be looking for that in the season. And he wants desperately to believe in Will Graham, but all the evidence says that he can't.
We've talked before about the fact that I'm a big Abigail fan. Should I give up any hope of there being any way that she's going to pop up somewhere?
Abigail is a very controversial dish, I'm afraid.
She is a very controversial dish. That line, let's go off on a tangent on that. You have this awesome casting with Gillian Anderson this season.
Yes.
And, we know she has a new series next season, but on NBC.
Right.
So have you had those discussions yet about how much can we have her? How much can she pop in?
Well, I've had those conversations with Gillian, and Gillian very much wants to be a part of the show in the second season. She loved being Dr. Hannibal Lecter's psychiatrist, and she loved working with Mass and Lawrence, and she very much wants to have scenes with Hugh Dancy. So I think it would be wonderful if we could have her continue her story in Season 2. She's got a big story. There is a lot of mystery around that lady. We need to find out what it means.
When you launch this show, and I think this happens with any time you're doing a new version of a beloved property, whether it's a comic book, novel, film, there's all the skepticism. There's people saying, because you are treading on, some sacred ground to people, it has to be extra gratifying when you launch the show after having a year and a half of skepticism to then see people so quickly turn around and go, oh, I get what he's doing here.
Yeah, it was really nice. I didn't really have any doubt because I knew I had a fantastic cast, and they were going to elevate anything that I did. So I really didn't. I felt pretty confident that, at least from my seat in the audience, that I was going to be seeing a show that was going to speak to me and hopefully other like-minded folks.
And then you have Lana in play. And, again, I like on the show that you don't go sort of down the obvious route. While there is a potential for a love story there with Will, it's not easy in any way, shape, or form. The one time he tried to make a move did not go very well.
Right.
Again, everyone's life, I would think, would be an upheaval given where Will is.
Right, exactly, and it is.
And so, how does she react to all of this?
Well, Alana is going to be in a very interesting position because we saw her really activated toward the end of the season as Will's champion, and she's going to continue to be his champion. So I think there's going to be a beauty in that relationship where Will knows that regardless of whether she thinks that he's guilty or not guilty, she will be there for him in some way or another.
You've spoken before about the fact that you have a multi-year plan for this show.
Yes.
Do you have a specific number of seasons in mind?
7. 7 would be good.
And you pretty much know, kind of placeholder-wise, what each season would be?
Yeah, I know the broad arcs. So, the first 3 seasons are essentially lost novels that no one has read. And then we get into season 4 with Red Dragon, and we get to turn that story inside out and find all the iconography in that tale and tell those stories. And then season 5 would be the Silence of the Lambs era, which we may or may not have. Right now we don't, the rights to Clarice Starling. So we would probably tell a parallel story that is very Silence of the Lambs-like, but not exactly it.
Gotcha. And that was you got to my next question. Obviously, we've spoken before about you right now you can't use Clarice. So would it be more that this is something that would happen instead of, or would it be Clarice is right around the corner and we just missed her?
It would be that would be the suggestion. It's that she may not be the only, and we already know from Miriam Lassett she's not the only trainee that Jack Crawford has sent off into investigation. So we would probably tell the story of another someone in Clarice Starling's class.
And you had Dr. Chilton this season, and
yes.
It surprised me. I thought maybe you'd hold off on him. Was that something where you just thought, this is too kind of a fun character, I want to introduce him early on?
Absolutely, and I knew very early on that I wanted to cast Raul Esparza to play him because I'd worked with Raul on Pushing Daisies, and I just knew he could deliver a version that would honor what Anthony Heald put to the screen in the previous incarnations and also bring something a little new. So it felt like a really great match for us.
I'm sure you hear this all the time, but the scenes where we watch Hannibal actually making his meals look amazing. I mean, it's a great-looking show in general, but it looks so delicious, and yet at the same time we're like, oh, that's supposed to be people. Is that kind of the idea, to almost tempt you to want to sit down to dinner with Hannibal despite knowing what he's serving?
You have to want to eat it. I mean, if it looked like an ugly dish, there is no temptation and no confusion. So we have to confuse the audience with something that looks absolutely delicious, and you stop and think, oh, God, it's people.
And you and I spoke before about something that I thought was really interesting, which is you held off on showing Hannibal committing acts of violence. So
yes.
There was a lot of, inference, and we could assume what was happening, but we weren't seeing him do those things. And what was sort of the design plan there with that?
Well, it was just really to lull the audience into a false sense of security with who this character was and what we were going to do with them. I think there were those who interpreted him as he is yet to become a cannibal, and that we're going to tell that story. But no, he's a cannibal, and he's always been a cannibal. And I think because Mass is approaching the character so differently than Anthony Hopkins and Brian Cox, or Anthony Cox, as they shall be known
who did
from
it
this
in
point on.
Broadway.
Yes, exactly. And so I felt like let's get to know this version of Hannibal before we start seeing how naughty he is.
And lastly, we're here at Comic-Con. I know you're very familiar with Comic-Con. What for you? Is it just always a fun sensory overload, or some people it's almost overwhelming? Do you just like taking it all in?
It's always a fun sensory overload, because what I love about Comic-Con is that it is a place where others gather. So, as somebody who's always sort of identified as other and has sort of like an other point of view, it's great to see so many others here together and celebrating their passion. And it's such a wonderful place that people don't have to curb their enthusiasm in any way. It's letting their flags fly, and I think that's a wonderful thing to be able to express that.
So, Hannibal Season 2, any idea when we might actually see it?
Spring or summer of 2014.
Spring or summer of 2014, which is a long wait, but if you haven't seen it yet, it gives you a lot of time to catch up.
It absolutely does.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Bryan, and thanks, guys, for watching. There'll be plenty more coming here from San Diego Comic-Con.
Thank you, Eric.